So, I'm a little bit out of sorts, a little bit pissed off right now. Got into a couple of stupid YouTube comment section arguments about Elliot Rodger, the Isla Vista Santa Barbara shooter, whatever they're trying to call him. And what's been severely irritating me is that he's been some sort of touchstone, some sort of flashpoint. His murder of 4 men and 2 women has become a rallying cry for gun control advocates and feminists to campaign against gun ownership, or at least the current state of gun laws in the country, and to campaign against MRAs or for feminism. I don't know. Every person I argue with has got a different idea of what happened, what caused that to happen, who Elliot Rodger was, and what that should mean for us in the future. Now, let me make this frankly clear, because several people in comment sections automatically assumed I was some sort of right-wing gun advocate. I don't care. First of all, I'm registered to vote as a Republican, believe it or not, because I registered back when I was 19 years old, before I was truly interested in politics. I am a moderate, I suppose. There are some liberal ideas I vehemently agree with, but it's mostly the entire right wing that I disagree with. And that I believe that people are largely misinformed about the way politics in terms of right wing and left wing are structured. I should probably link Unraveling Fallacy, a guy I'm subscribed to, has an excellent video describing exactly the sphere of politics America actually operates out of, and what the two parties are actually more or less the same party. But you all kind of already know that, and I'm getting off topic. Elliot Rodger was insane. Let's get that out the gate right now. He was a malignant narcissist. Absolutely, positive, most likely at the very least a manic depressive. The dude had absolutely no control of his emotions and certainly had explosive rage. I've read part of his manifesto. Most of the people I've argued with have read none of it. I haven't seen his YouTube videos. I'd be surprised if they're still up. I am speaking slightly out of ignorance because I haven't read the whole thing. I don't know the guy. I'm not even aware of exactly the names and identities of all the people that he killed. I know he stabbed his 2 roommates to death with a knife, and then injured at least half a dozen people with gunfire and killed another 4, 2 of which were men. Wait. Fuck, I'm terrible with math and I'm tired. Look, I'm really irritated because there's so many people saying that Elliot Rodger acted purely out of feminism. That is bullshit. I mean, not feminism, misogyny. There are feminists saying that Elliot Rodger was driven by pure misogyny and wanted to war against women, which he did say. Now, it's important to understand in context that Elliot Rodger was bullied all throughout middle school and high school. Some of his bullying was actually probably really light, but because he was unable to socialize properly, because he was a literal psychopath, as in he could not socialize, empathize, or sympathize normally. He's a psychopath. He could not relate to other people. He was obsessed with himself in the way he felt. I was bullied all throughout high school, and it is extremely easy to see your tormentors, whether they be abusive parents, abusive siblings, or bullying in school, as inhuman, because it requires a level of dehumanizing to bully people. It's all a problem with proper socialization, and typically people who literally do aggressively bully other people are traumatized in some way, usually sexually or physically, and usually by their own family. There's a complete psychological issue going on at large, but let's focus on Elliot Rodger. He eventually detailed in his manifesto, which it seems as he wrote it went more and more crazy, that he was so envious of people who got to have sex and was so sure that he was going to die a virgin that not only did he hate women for, in his eyes, only having sex with people he despised, people he thought who were assholes, were superficial, were rude, and socially aggressive and bullies. He thought that you had to be a cruel bad boy to get girls. To a certain extent, there's something to that. But he saw it as an egregious offense. Now, he thought women were such superficial creatures and that they had to be so stupid and incompetent to be attracted to the men he hated that he thought that was worse. Now, I'm going to divulge something to you that I think is a little bit inappropriate, but it's the only way I can figure out to get it in context. For a certain extent of my teenage years, the same formative years that warped part of Elliot's mind, and I'm sure he was born with some sort of brain imbalance disorder at the very least. When I was a kid, an abusive stepfather who was a severe alcoholic and beat my mother and me. I had to live with him for 5 years. And towards the end of that 5 years, you know who I hated even more than that abusive, drug addict, alcoholic stepfather? I hated my mother for keeping him in the house. Way more. Because it was her house, and she was supporting him. He was unemployed. She had every ability to send him to jail forever for all the stuff he did to us for years. But she wouldn't, and I had no control over the situation. I hated my mother, who was a perfectly sane person who just wanted to help the guy and wanted to love him because she did love him, and there were redeeming parts of his character that made him lovable when he was sober, that she didn't want to abandon him. She thought she was doing the right thing, but I hated her more because she didn't understand the toxicity of the situation, and it was her responsibility. So Elliot Rodger hates women more because they love what he really hates, which is men that he envies. He was not a pure misogynist. He was a pure narcissist who thought that the way he understood the world was the way it was in its entirety, and he was the only one who was right. Okay? And I think it's shameful that tragedies like this are used to grandstand. Now, on the gun control thing, I'll be brief. I don't care. I don't own a gun. I've never even touched a gun. I've never fired a gun. I don't intend to, and I don't want to. I understand the value of a gun to protect yourself. I understand the risks of having a gun in the house. But I understand that removing Elliot Rodger's ability to legally buy a gun has no effect other than maybe time and a little bit of effort to prevent him from getting a gun. People have called me stupid and said I'm making a false dichotomy by saying the only way you stop mass shootings is you got 3 options. Although I usually presented it in 2, which is how I got false dichotomy. 1, you take away almost all the guns and have a sort of law system where it's like Great Britain, where pretty much nobody has guns. Handguns are outlawed outright, and very, 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 very few people get shot. That's almost unthinkable because of how widespread guns and gun culture, and the fact that it's ingrained in the Bill of Rights of the Constitution. You're not going to get rid of all the guns. It's a non-option. Number 2, you can do sweeping gun reform, completely ignoring the fact that a lot of mass shooters don't own the guns they shoot people with. They steal them. Pretty sure Darren Klebold, and the name escapes me, the other kid who was the Columbine shooters, they were using guns owned by their family. They were teenagers. They didn't need to buy those Tech-9 submachine guns and sawed-off shotguns they used to murder more than a dozen people. I don't remember the exact statistic, but it was huge. If people want to kill people, and they want to use guns, and they know people who have guns, it doesn't matter if they're mentally incompetent or have violent felonies on the record, they can get the guns, and they will still shoot people, because the guns are everywhere, and we've already established that I'm pretty sure you can't get rid of the guns. I advocated the 3rd option, that pretty much all of my detractors and comment sections completely ignored. There were several feminists that were so determined to say that Elliot Rodger was a sane person. Read one page of that manifesto and tell me this man was sane. By the end of it, he was declaring himself a god who is destined to reform the world in his own image. Now, I'm almost done here. He was completely insane. He was a pure psychopath. So many people don't understand the state of mental health treatment in this country. Medication is not always covered by insurance, and it's usually extremely, extremely expensive. Anybody who has any disease that requires medication understands how difficult it is to pay for these things. They're brutally expensive. Because of the state of insurance in this country right now, which hopefully Obamacare will have some recourse against, getting a regular psychiatrist to prescribe medication and therapist to see the person very regularly is extremely expensive. I've gone through a bit of therapy myself, and let me tell you that it's difficult to find a therapist who takes your insurance, because your insurance is usually an asshole and wants to pay him way less than he wants to charge. Or she. Now, getting help is extremely difficult. Getting long-term help is extremely difficult, and not every state gives family members the ability to forcibly, what's the word I'm looking for? Put a guy in a mental health treatment center that's inpatient. It's difficult. Here in Florida, it's not so much. They have something called a Baker Act, which means that if enough people think you're a threat to yourself and others, you can be pretty much imprisoned, not really imprisoned, but, forcibly detained inside a mental health treatment center for at least 48 hours. And until that 48 hours is up, you cannot leave until a licensed person, I believe either a psychologist or a psychiatrist, deems you safe to leave. Not every state has that. Elliot Rodger's family tried desperately to get him help. They called the police on him, but the police, under the law, couldn't do anything to detain him because the kid was awfully good at pretending not to be homicidal. Go ahead. Make it really hard to buy a gun if you're a felon or have a history of mental health treatment. It's not going to stop people from shooting each other. You're not going to take away all the guns. Gun reform is barking up the wrong tree. It's a fool's errand. It's a red herring. It's going to achieve nothing. And it surprises me that otherwise extremely intelligent and astute people really think that gun control is going to stop armed homicide. It's not. Remember, even Elliot Rodger stabbed his 2 roommates to death with a knife. Last year, a kid ran through his school, stabbed I think like 13 people. I'm pretty sure they all lived. In China, a couple years ago, I think at least, a guy with a knife killed like 30 people, like running through a crowd. I really wish I would have looked that up and shown it to you. In states where guns are difficult to obtain, like Great Britain, people are robbing gas stations with samurai swords. Crime finds a way. Okay? It does. The only way I believe you can stop malignant narcissists, sociopaths, violent psychopaths is to help them. I'll leave you with a quote from Marilyn Manson, who was targeted for blame for the Columbine shootings. Darren Klebold and the other kid whose name I really should remember, the Columbine shooters didn't listen to Marilyn Manson. And Marilyn Manson was asked in an interview, what would you say to the 2 Columbine shooters if you could say something to them? Marilyn Manson replied, I wouldn't say a damn thing to them. I would have listened to them. because it seems like nobody else did. I hope some of that made sense to some of you fucking people. That's all I got.